embellished with colorful stories that are very similar in most cultures throughout thousands of years, slightly different here and there. But let me tell you what everybody gets told that's not true. Everybody says, well, these are pictures, and they've built stories around the pictures because that's the way they look to them up there. Well, that's ridiculous. Go out at night sky and look at Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia, it looks like a W. It's just opposite the pole star. And there's no way, it's a W. There's no way it looks like a woman chained to a chair holding an ear of corn. I mean, you know, come on. But it's consistent. The story's consistent. The cluster of the stars has nothing to do with the pictures that are associated with them. That's something obvious just by looking at the pictures. What most people don't know, including most astronomers, is where you get the story is by knowing the names of the stars in the order of their brightness. When you know the names of the stars in the order of their brightness, you can put together the story that originally was told about it and the pictures to remind you of the story, not the stars. You with me? It's a mnemonic that you teach kids with. You know, if you're teaching the piano, the spaces are F-A-C-E, right? No, there's no face there, but you use that as a way, you know, F-A-C, you know, whatever. It's a mnemonic, right? We all use mnemonics, right? There are many scholars that believe they were the mnemonics that Adam and Enoch taught their kids, God's plan of redemption. And let's see what we can find out. The first one is Virgo. That's the Virgin, no problem there. Let's turn around a little bit and take a look at it. The primary star, Alpha being the brightest star, is Spica, which means ear of corn. The Hebrew name for this star isn't Spica. That's the one that's handed down through the Babylonian Greek traditions. That's the one the astronomers use. The Hebrew name for that is Semek, which means branch. But here's the interesting thing. There are 20 different Hebrew words translated branch. Only Semek is used exclusively of the Messiah in Jeremiah and Zechariah and twice, and in Isaiah and so forth. Now, something else you should notice, I don't think I earmarked it here with my notes. You notice what she's holding in her left hand. She's got a branch in one hand and an ear of, and grain in the other. And the branch and the grain of corn, remember John, see the branch is in her right hand and an ear of corn in her left. From this and a lot of deacons that surround her, she's the promised seed of the woman. She's the virgin that will give birth to the child that will be the Redeemer. The branch, of course, speaks of the Messiah, and the ear of corn, Jesus explains for us in John 12, unless the corn die, it will not bring life and so forth. The next one is Libra, the scales. Well, the Hebrew name for this constellation is Monzanaim, meaning the scales or weighing. And the Arabic name, many of the names, we don't have the Hebrew names, but we do have the Arabs have a very active astronomy because that's the way they navigate on the desert. And so many of these names, we have the Arabic, not the Hebrew for. Al-Zabina, purchase or redemption is what it means. The Coptics call it Lambadia, the station of propitiation. The Latin is where we get the Libra for weighing. The brightest star is Zubin al-Ganubi, which means the price that's deficient. And the next brightest star is Zubin al-Kameli, which means the price that covers. See, someone is short and somebody else covers for us. That beginning to sound familiar? Revelation 5, Psalm 49, so on. And the third one is Gamma Zubin al-Akrab. That's the price of conflict. And it's pointing towards Centaurus and the victim that's slain. The deacons. The deacons here are the cross. Ooh, that's interesting. The Hebrew Adam cut off. The lupus or victim slain. And the Hebrew name here is Asidah, which means to be slain. The Arabic is Asidatan, which means to be slain. The Egyptian name is interesting. It's Surah for this. It's a lamb. I think that's kind of interesting. And then the crown is the other deacon that's associated with the Libra, the crown that's bestowed. And the Hebrew name for it is Atara, the royal crown. And we could go on and on with this. I won't. I'll show you one I think is really interesting. And this is the one where the wrestler is wrestling with a serpent, and his one foot is being bitten by the serpent, and the other foot is on Scorpio's head. So I think that's kind of fun. And this all climaxes at the end with Leo the lion. And the Hebrew name is Ariah, the lion. And of course, this lion is associated with the tribe of Judah. It's a tribal standard. It's interesting that the brightest star there is Regulus in this constellation, which is treading underfoot. Deneb is the judge cometh. Deneb Alised is the judge shall reign. And the deacons associated with him are the fleeing serpent, the cup of wrath, or cup of fire, Corvus the raven. So these are the constellations that we see. And any place you find some writing about this, unless it's been unusually enlightened, it'll carry with it the baggage of the old mythology from Greek and Egypt and what have you. But let's take a look at the message. I'm compressing several hours, if I go through all of these, to give you the message that this has. We have Virgo the virgin, which represents the seed of the woman. This is the constellation of the three deacons. Seed of the woman, Coma is the desire of nations, the man of double nature and humiliation, and the exalted shepherd and harvester. All are carried by the constellation of Virgo and the three deacons that are associated with it. Libra is the price to be paid and the cross to be endured, the victim that was slain, and the crown that is purchased. And this gets kind of interesting. Scorpio speaks of the conflict, the serpent's coils, the struggle with the enemy, and the toiling of the vanquisher of evil. Sagittarius speaks of the double-natured one triumphing. He gladdens the heavens, he builds fires of punishment, he casts down the dragon. Capricornus, life out of death, the arrow of God, pierced and failing, springing up again in abundant life. Aquarius, the life waters from on high, drinking in the heavenly food, carrying the good news, bearing aloft the cross over all the earth. You got the Southern Cross in here too. I won't get into that here. Pisces has the multiplication of the Redeemer's people, upheld and governed by the Lamb, intended bride bound and exposed, the bridegroom exalted. Aries has the Lamb found worthy, the bride released and be making ready, Satan bound, and the breaker triumphing. Taurus, the invincible rulers come, the sublime vanquisher, the river of judgment, the all-ruling shepherd. Gemini has the marriage of the Lamb, the enemy trodden down, the prince coming in glory, and his princely following. You get to what we call Cancer, the possession secured. It speaks of two folds, the lesser fold, the church of the firstborn, and the greater fold, Israel, sevenfolding into an everlasting kingdom. And the final one, of course, is Leo the lion, the king rending, the serpent fleeing, the bowl of wrath upon him, his carcass devoured. Now, the classic study in this is by E.W. Bullinger, called the Gospel in the Stars. Also, J.A. Seiss, before the Civil War, wrote a book on this. They're probably the two most reliable ones. I have about 4 or 5 of them. Most of them are echoes of much of the same thing. Plus, the big trick is to try to get some of the missing names of stars identified. And so, on the one hand, this is quite conjectural and very controversial. There are many Bible teachers think that this is way out in left field. And on the other hand, it's my view that there is enough here that seems for real to respect it. There are many things in here that are still, we're filling in blanks that we don't really have enough of the names of some of the stars to justify some of the things it said. But I wanted to show it to you because of because of this whole business, that the stars were put there for signs. And God's greatest achievement is not the creation. The creation is emphasized in Genesis and in Romans 1 and in Job 38 and so forth, and Isaiah 44 and 45, etc. But you can take a half a dozen passages and that's it. God's greatest achievement, his greatest glory, is not the creation, it's the redemption. You see, how do you say that, Chuck? You measure it by 2 things. First of all, how much space in the Bible is devoted to the subject? Well, the creation has a chapter or 2 in Genesis, a chapter and 2 in Job, and a chapter or 2 in Isaiah, and that's largely it. The redemption, whole book of Genesis. Certainly the book of Exodus, where they're redeemed out of Egypt. Certainly Leviticus, the Torah is all about it. And you go through the historical books, is the whole idea of Israel's ultimate redemption. Certainly the prophets. Certainly the Gospels. Certainly the epistles. Revelation is what's the revelation all about? The climax of God's plan of redemption. There's another way you can measure how important it is. And that's, what did it cost God? What did it cost God to create the universe? 6 days. Breathed out of his nostrils, as the scripture would put it. What did his redemption cost him? It cost him his son. And there are aspects of that that are permanent forever. No, I think that the heavens declare the glory of God. I think the heavens do declare his glory if we do the homework. And tragically, so much of this has been lost through the mythology. It's going to get lost primarily because of what happens in Genesis chapter 11, and we'll touch upon it when we get there. When these ideas, these mnemonics, and the heritage they represent gets corrupted at Babylon. And most of what we know about this in our parlance is the Babylonian translated into the Persian, into the Greek, into the Latin. And garbled, of course, all the way.